Daniel Cruz knew how to move through a city without asking it for permission. He drove a white van with no markings and a temperate playlist that cycled between static and soft rock, the kind of music people let themselves forget in favor of the route ahead. He had learned the trade in small increments, the angles of alleys that hid loading docks, the best coffee shop for a 10-minute window, how to look like you belonged while carrying something you absolutely did not advertise. Phantom Courier was the company name on the contracts and the myth in the margins. A delivery outfit that promised discretion in exchange for cash, and whether those deliveries were legal depended on who paid and how deep the pockets were. Daniel had started as one of the many faceless drivers because the pay was good and because the job asked for few questions. He signed the non-disclosure with a short pen stroke, learned the codes, and practiced the soft, blunt art of not noticing. The work was cleverly organized, GPS dots that evaporated from the app at the last second, dead drops at laundromats, anonymous lockers paid for with untraceable cards. His boss, a man who only ever answered as Ortiz through the dispatcher, kept things efficient and impersonal. Contracts arrived through encrypted messages and payment through unmarked envelopes. People called Phantom a courier service. Others used darker labels. Daniel avoided the labels and kept his head down. Keep it small. Keep it honest, he told himself on the nights he lay awake listening to the building's pipes. Mostly it was easy. Mostly, he told himself, it was just movement. The evening that changed his calculus started with a package he had signed for 100 times. A reinforced crate labeled only with a numeric code and a handling note that read, Care, Level A. At the drop, a woman in a green headscarf exchanged a plastic card for the crate without a word. Daniel had done many such exchanges, and he had learned that curiosity could be fatal to a comfortable life. He should have put the crate in the van and moved on. He did not. The crate rattled oddly, a feathered sound, as if something compact and alive lived inside a false chamber. He had a moment of practical irritation, and then an impulse, old and human, made him wedge the crate open when the woman turned her back. Inside, instead of the expected electronic contraption, or cache of cash, there lay a stack of manila envelopes and a slim book with red-inked tabs. The envelopes contained names, addresses, and what looked like delivery notes, invoices for special handling with amounts and signatures. The book was a log, dates, pickup points, drop-off coordinates, and annotations in a handwriting that tilted like understatement into menace. In one column, beside a list of municipal contracts and private security firms, someone had written the code, Client House. Daniel's thumb brushed the paper and smudged a black mark. He closed the crate and shoved it into the van, hands shaking enough to rattle the steering wheel. I shouldn't have looked, he thought. I shouldn't have, but I did. The thought was immediate and honest, and did not feel like a bell so much as a siren. Once curiosity had found purchase, it grew precise. Daniel copied a few pages with his phone, fingers moving fast, and used an old prepaid account to email them to an address he thought might belong to someone who could do something with them. Jenna Cole, a name he'd heard at the bar where she drank and wrote, a reporter with a reputation for breaking municipal stories. He did not expect a reply that night. He expected silence or a threat, or a brief panic that would pass if he drank enough coffee and kept moving. Instead, at dawn, his phone filled with short lines. Meet me, noon, dock 12. Jenna's message came with a photo. Her candid profile, hair in a knot, a notepad tucked under her arm. He met her by the shipping containers, a place where the city smelled of rope and diesel and other people's labors. She looked at the copied pages and the book he had slipped from the crate like a man presenting contraband. "You're playing with a bigger ledger than you realize," she said, voice steady and sharp. "This isn't courier level. This is coordination. Weapons, unregistered high-value electronics, influence goods, things that grease doors and buy silence." He watched her eyes go to a name repeated in the margins, then to the code HOUSE. "Who runs it?" he asked. "We don't know," she said. "But whoever keeps a ledger like this is running an operation." Daniel felt, in the first-person simplicity of his own chest, both fear and a new, dangerous clarity. If I hand this back, they bury it. If I keep it, I'm a target. He didn't yet know which danger was easier to survive. Once he began to look, the city's seams showed their stitching. He followed routes attentively. The same residential cul-de-sac that received packages for maintenance after midnight. The same warehouse where boxes emptied into black SUVs. And the same storefront that served as a front for an import brokerage that had friends in municipal planning. Daniel did the thing only someone with his vantage could do. He watched from inside the van, counting taillights and noting faces that arrived too often. Phantom's scope was broader than he'd thought. The ledger had lines tying deliveries to private security firms that then supplied extra personnel at political fundraisers, to construction projects that required the unbothered removal of zoning restrictions, to a list of names with amounts next to them under DU. Occasionally a note would appear, "Hot, no late." It was businesslike, but it smelled of pressure. Daniel learned coded phrasing. Relocation could mean witness intimidation. Special handling could mean a weapon or forged paperwork. Client, house, suggested a protected patron whose presence required ceremonial care. He found himself staying late at the garage, the van idling, tasting exhaust, and the small victory of having watched a pattern emerge. Jenna began sending him back-channel questions. He answered in sparse sentences that held too much weight. "Do you want to go to the police?" she asked in one message that arrived like a noose. He typed, "I don't trust our tailors and our trustees. They patch holes with favors." The reply was immediate. "Then we build proof." Their alliance was pragmatic and fragile. A driver who could ghost through routes, and a reporter who could make paper thunder. The more evidence they gathered, the more dangerous their nights became. Daniel began to notice the telltale surveillance of a manhunt. Unfamiliar license plates that followed at a distance. Men in mid-career suits who lingered by coffee shops and took notes as if writing about weather. He bought a burner phone and stashed the ledger copy in places that felt like the body remembers. Behind the loose tile in his mother's kitchen, where she hid the good salt. In a hollow of the mechanic's bench, where an old man kept bolts. But modern eyes do not tire. They replicate. Late one drizzle-soaked evening, he returned to the garage to find a note beneath his windshield wiper. A white card with a single line typed in a font that tried to be casual and failed. "You have something that does not belong to you. Return it." Under the words was an address. If the people who made that card wanted to have a polite conversation, Daniel realized they knew better than to leave pleasantries in public. He called Jenna with his throat tight and told her he was going to the address with a camera and a plan to be invisible. She told him to be careful and to do nothing. "You're the courier," she said. "You make yourself small. You keep to the pattern. You do not make waves." He understood that instruction in terms of his job. He disagreed with it in the terms of his conscience. "I didn't sign up to move bodies for other people's sins," he told her softly on the line. "But I also didn't sign up to be complicit." When he arrived at the address, a nondescript row of townhouses, he parked 2 blocks away and walked with his shoulders hunched. He found a door with a digital keypad and a small camera. Someone watched from the second-floor window as he took a long, slow photograph. Through the glass, a man placed a hand over a ledger on a table and then, with unnecessary formality, closed a file cabinet and turned off the light. The breach came fast. He had expected threats and perhaps a shove. The world gave him an ambush. 2 men approached his van as he rounded the corner that night. One blocked his path with the jut of an elbow, and the other, smaller, quick, tried to wrench the door open. Daniel's first instinct was flight. The next was the muscle memory of hands learning where to grip the wheel and how to throw a van into motion. He slammed the vehicle into gear, felt the rubber bite the wet asphalt, and the van lurched forward. The smaller man grabbed at his jacket and was pulled along the passenger side like an animal tangled in a leash. Daniel's heart hammered, but his mind cleared into a single thread of doing what he had to do to survive. Tires squealed. The smaller man's fingers let go, and the van surged toward the bridge where the city frayed into industrial gray. He drove with no route and no plan, only the ledger in the glove compartment, and the knowledge in his chest that whoever owned this ledger would not let him go. "They're hunting me," he told himself, and the words had the weight of a verdict. The chase spread like a net. His rearview mirror filled with the silhouettes of cars that did not belong to honest drivers. He took turns sharply, ducked into an underpass, and finally stopped near an abandoned marina where the tide hissed like something patient and waiting. It was there, in the marina's skeletal quiet, that Jenna and 2 federal agents, the very ones they'd begged to help, who had taken their time digging through layers, found him. Their arrival was not cinematic. They wore plain coats and looked older than their titles suggested. "We heard," the senior agent said, and there was a tired gravity to his voice. Jenna had a bruise blooming on one cheek where a rough man had tried to teach her fear in the parking lot of the courthouse. She said nothing, only handed Daniel a paper cup of coffee which felt like cold medicine. The agents moved with a procedure that became its own kind of mercy, securing the ledger, placing it in an evidence bag, creating chain of custody documents with slow respect. They told Daniel that the ledger had skirts that reached further than he could imagine. Not only black market trades, but bank accounts, a string of nominee companies, a construction fund whose beneficiaries included men with municipal titles and men with militia leanings. He learned that organized crime did not always look like the movies. It sometimes wore the bland face of logistics and paperwork and appointments. The agents promised protections that bore the texture of legal weight: relocation assistance, potential witness protection, and the slow, grinding machine of federal indictments. Daniel, who had wanted nothing more than an honest route and a week without trouble, felt the concession of his life shrink and expand at once. He had saved something and lost something. The months that followed were steady and not kind. The federal case unfolded in sealed indictments, plea bargains, and the kind of legal choreography that punishes slowly and visibly. Arrests were made in dawn raids that left the city's morning shows breathless, but also hungry for the next headline. Phantom Courier's operation, once a rumor, was exposed as a nexus that laundered more than goods. It laundered influence, created trusts for silent partners, and supplied muscle when paperwork and persuasion didn't suffice. Large men in suits and small men with sharp tongues were photographed at courthouse steps, and a handful of municipal employees quietly resigned while others were escorted out in cuffs. Jenna wrote pieces that stitched the ledger's names to bank transfers and sworn testimony. She won a cautious applause from an audience that liked its villains neatly dressed. Daniel took his papers, changed his number, and got a new job driving a municipal waste truck 3 hours north of the city, where the roads met pine trees and the rhythm of roots felt like a secular liturgy. He missed the city sometimes in first-person pangs that were sharp and particular. "I miss the hum of delivery doors," he would tell himself as he emptied bins at dawn, and the confession felt less like regret than the small weight of a life he selected by accident and corrected by effort. What he kept, inside a safe deposit box, whose number he wrote in a ledger of a different kind, was a photocopy of the red-tabbed log. He opened it sometimes with the same reverence one might reserve for a relic, not to gloat or to remember, but to remind himself of the difference between motion and consequence. The lawsuits would spin for years. Men once untouchable found their lives narrowed by testimony, and some of the worst were sentenced. But the ledger's existence had not ended corruption, only made certain transactions harder and certain faces more cautious. Daniel learned that the phantom behind the courier's name could be banished with paper and persistence, but that ghosts of complicity walked the city in many clothes. In small triumphs, he found the quiet satisfaction of a man who had done the uncommon thing of turning over a dangerous truth to those who could use it without blood on his hands. He had been a courier of unremarkable things for a long time. Now he was a courier of a different order, one who had delivered evidence and, with it, a chance for a city to measure itself. The roads up north were quieter and the coffee worse, but the routes were honest. When fog drifted over the pine boughs in the mornings, he would drive and think, sometimes in the first person, about the ledger and the men who once wanted it back. "We move what we are paid to move," he would remind himself, a rule as true as it was dangerous, and then he would check his mirror and keep driving.